Hello and welcome to the world's first Paul Weller fan podcast. I'm Dan Jennings. This is the story of 66, a celebration of the brand new album from the legend that is singer, songwriter and musician Paul Weller. This new series features podcast conversations with many of the huge talents that have been involved in the creation of Paul's 17th solo studio album. What I hope is that these podcasts give you a deeper insight into the creation of the new LP and that sheer joy of the creative process. And ultimately, it all comes back to the songs. What you'll hear about this LP, probably more than any other, is an album packed full of collaboration. Welcome to the story of 66. Delighted to be joined by another brand new guest to the Paul Weller Fan Podcast. On this episode, we are joined by bassist Jake Fletcher. A singer-songwriter in his own right, he is part of the Paul Weller live band and playing on 66. So in this episode, we're going to dig into his own music, hear how a connection through his own band, the Gramotones, back in 2013, via Steve Pilgrim, Steve Craddock, Black Barn Studios, leads to supporting Weller on tour across Europe and in the UK, and these amazing connections which ultimately lead to him becoming part of Paul Weller's band. Tours for On Sunset, Fat Pop, and then we get Paul Weller 66, playing on songs Soul Wandering, Sleepy Hollow, and if you're lucky enough to have the deluxe version of the album, you'll hear him backing vocals on Wheel of Fortune, bass guitar and Rhodes on Now Is Here. Jake is a fabulous talent in his own right and a real joy to hear his stories on the podcast. So let's get into it. Jake Fletcher, thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much, Dan. Appreciate it.
I should ask because pretty much everybody in Weller circles seems to have a nickname. Have you got a Weller given nickname?
Craddock used to call me Fresh Legs a lot. I don't know really. I don't know. I call myself Flecky sometimes, but I don't think I get that. Maybe Fletch. I'm not sure. Just off the back of the UK tour relatively recently. So I want to kick off with that actually, because one of the pictures, I think it was on your Instagram, was Shepherd's Bush. And I was at that gig and it was the first one. It was like the warm-up gig. And there was a picture of you and you said, Ace first gig. And I got to hang with Mick Talbot, Martin Freeman and Davina McCall. Yeah, I didn't know I knew Mick was coming. I think he got up and he did Shout to the Top with us, which was wicked because he's never played with us while I've been in the band. And I think Mick's brilliant. And he's just such a nice bloke and he's really great to talk to as well. Like, because I've met him a few times and Shani, his missus, like who always comes with Nikki, Paul's sister, he's brilliant and she's hilarious as well. So it was great for him to see him and play with me. I don't know if you saw the next day, Alison Hammond's talking about it on ITV's This Morning. She was there. And I was laughing because she says my favourite Paul song has to be You Do Something to Me. And we didn't even play it. I thought that, yeah. He's just like, yeah, that wasn't on the set list. Talk me through the feelings of the UK tour. I mean, it seemed like you guys are absolutely on fire. Yeah, it's been really fun. This is my first UK tour with Paul, so everything operates a little bit differently in the UK than it does in Europe, just logistically and just the way it runs in general. So it's been interesting to see for that because it's been kind of still things are new to me. And I think it's weird because a lot of the band forget like that a lot of these things are fresh to me. You know, they've done these things so many times, like we probably end up chatting about it, but like the Albert Hall and Wembley, it's like, well, they've done the Albert Hall so many times, you know, things like that. So it's things like we've done, they've been a really big thing to me, whereas not saying they haven't, but, you know, boxes are newly ticked for me. So. Yeah, the band definitely, I mean, they're not complacent about any of this. You can, when I'm talking to them, it's kind of, you know, all of it. They're like, I'm blessed and I'm grateful and this is amazing to be part of it. But you're right. This is everything's first experience for you as part of the band, right? Yeah, for the gigs that are, you know, like Festival Hall or Albert Hall, you know, they've been things that I've really wanted to always tick off in my lifetime at some point. So I feel really grateful that they've been ticked off. A lot of them have been done within 12 months, you know. Beginning of this year, you had Sydney and you had Japan as well. Yeah, mental. I've always wanted to go to Japan just because I just think it's such an interesting place. It's kind of feels kind of like a rich kind of westernized country, but at the same time, the culture's so different. So it's a really interesting place to be, you know, just sent to really to gig. And the gigs are really different. The people are really different in a good way, but everyone's really respectful and really welcoming. I think they're happy that you've took the time to travel all that way to see them. It's been brilliant. The rest of the band told me about these kind of extremes of weather as well. So Japan, you had snow and then glorious sunshine, obviously, in Sydney, Australia. Bill, our tour manager, told us, you know, like we've got your 2 cases for the tour booked. So you can literally packed for two climates. Because it literally was, we were in Sapporo, which is North Japan, and the snow, I've got videos of some of the snowdrifts, and they're like 9 foot, you know, and it's taller than me, which isn't hard. And then within a week we were in Sydney, which was really, really boiling hot. So it was a great experience, though. It's the most fun I've had so far with Paul, just as a cultural thing to see as well as the gigs.
And what's the Sydney Opera House like as a venue to play at?
Yeah, it's a great theatre. I think there's 2 or maybe 3 inside the actual Opera House, which I didn't know. I just thought it was 1. But there's definitely more than 1 theatre within the actual complex. But the one we were in was brilliant, and it was amazing. Like, the dressing rooms, there's probably about 20 dressing rooms, and nearly every dressing room had a Steinway grand piano in, which you just turn up at your dressing room with all your bits and pieces and for the gig, and the fridge full of beer or whatever. And then there's a Steinway sat there, which is quite a luxury, you know.
You don't get that everywhere, no. Let me ask you, so first connections with Paul Weller. Let's go on this journey, because I'm really interested in kind of, you know, obviously when you turn up and you become part of the Paul Weller band, but actually the connection goes way back further than that. So the first one I've been able to find was around September 2013, where you guys, your band, the Gramotones, who are, I'm going to describe this band as having a 60s vibe with a modern twist, was how it was talked about, if that's fair. And you recorded down at Blackbarn. So how the heck did that happen?
So we've got a friend, with me and Steve Pilgrim, have got a mutual friend called Mark, who was our manager at the time, and he's a brilliant bloke. And he hooked us up with Steve Pilgrim to record at Blackbarn, kind of wanting Steve to produce us and hoping to kind of have a bit of a way in maybe through that, you know, just further our career or whatever, our band. So we went and recorded with Steve. Steve showed one of our songs in particular that I wrote called Dotry Street that Paul loved and Steve Craddock loved. They played it on the bus maybe or something like that. And then I ended up doing a tour with Steve Craddock when he was doing the Craddock Band. We ended up doing an acoustic support slot. He'd got up like within a few weeks of us having this support slot booked in for later on in the year. We met Steve at a little garden party festival that he turned up at, and we ended up playing the Riverboat song together, like my band and Steve. And I ended up having to try and bust the words to it. Anyway, it worked out all right. And then his guitar player at the time didn't want to commit to the rehearsals playing with Steve in the Steve Craddock Band. So Steve rang me up and said, like, you know, well, you're already on the tour. Do you want to do your bit with your band and then come and play with me afterwards on electric? Because we were doing an acoustic before. So I was like, well, yeah, I'd love to, you know. I'm a big fan of Steve anyway. I always loved like Autumn Colour Scene. So we did that. We did the tour, and then I got really friendly with Steve. And then we did a support tour for Paul in Europe not long afterwards. And then Paul put that track, Dotry Street, he put it in Mojo for one of his favourite songs of that year, I think. So it was kind of like, wow, you know, it was such an accolade, really. And then we carried on for a bit as a band. We split up, and as we split up, Steve needed a cover for guitar for Specials gigs because he'd started playing with the Specials by then. So he asked me if I wanted to cover for him whenever he was out with Paul or Ocean Colour Scene. So I did like maybe 5 years off and on covering for Steve. So, you know, he'd be on tour in the States and say, could you come and finish off the rest of this tour for me because I've got to go and do, you know, OCS or Weller or something like that. So I ended up doing that for a bit.
These connections are just incredible, aren't they?
Since I've been working with Paul, I've had like lads that really want to get into the session thing, you know, asking me about like, how do I get into doing this? And it's like such a complex, you know, like my particular story is such a spider web or spag ball of things, you know, like that have just happened bit by luck. And then some people say you make your own luck. I don't know. I'm not sure whether I totally believe it, but there's definitely luck involved in it. And you just got to be in the right place at the right time. And when you are in that place and someone sees you, you've got to be on form and play as best as you can. So I'm really grateful of that.
Let me ask you about that EP. So that EP that you recorded, so Steve Pilgrim produced then, Charles would have been there engineering and mixing and all that. And this comes out in 2014. And on that, you put special thanks to Paul Weller, which I guess would have been around the studio, but also to Chris Difford. So I wanted to check about the Squeeze connection. I know you're a big fan of Squeeze, but what was the connection with Chris?
He tried his best to try and get us a deal. He was really helpful, put us all in the right places. I think he was either managing or he was certainly helping the Stripes out at the time, which where Josh McClurry comes in. I didn't really know Josh at the time, but now I've actually worked for Josh. I've teched for Josh on a Miles Kane tour and then ended up doing a little bit of playing with Miles. You know, I know him now. I would class him as a mate. He's nice lad. He's a great player as well. He's got a really good voice. But yeah, we worked with Charles, who's brilliant. You always get a chat out of Charles.
Oh, I know that. I'm seeing him on Saturday. It's going to be a long afternoon.
Brilliant, though. Have you seen that he's got his own bell at the studio that Hannah bought him to shut him up? Yeah. Waffling on too much, you've got to ring that bell. And he goes, okay, I know, right, back to work.
I love that. Dotry Street, let's dig into this because that was on the EP. And the bit you didn't mention was that, and this must be the Steve Credit connection, is that then ends up being covered by P.P. Arnold on her album as well. She mentioned it on the podcast, actually.
I don't know whether that was Steve's idea or it was Paul's or not, but I think it was Steve's. But he put it to her because he was putting this album, this Adventures of P.P. Arnold album together. Oh, he did a great job of it. He took it somewhere I probably wouldn't have took it out. I wouldn't have had the vision to take it anyway. It made it like a Sandy Shaw tune, or like as if Scylla covered it, or Dusty, or one of these kind of, pop flash soul singers from the 60s. I thought it was brilliant. It's really, really good. Probably the best version, I think, that's out there of it.
It's great, isn't it? Because there's your credit as a writer on that album for that song. And I looked it up. Dotry Street is... is it a street?
It's not far from where I live, but it's in a part of Ulm that's kind of quite run down now, actually. And I always drove past it and I always thought, I wondered what it was. It must have been a street at some point. It's about 10 foot long, isn't it? Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's tiny.
It's just it, and it just says Dotry Street. I don't know. I wanted to write one day, and just thought I'll just try and write a song about something that's actually doesn't really exist and see what comes up. And it was done really quick. I don't really remember much about writing it, to be honest, but I don't think a lot of people do really remember about writing much. You just get in a zone where it ends up being fuzzy when you come out of it. I don't know. It's really odd writing songs.
I really love these two's perspective on it because you've got Mr. Weller and currently on the tour as well. He's playing this again, where you've got Stanley Road with the kind of Pot of Dreams and the Run Road. And then you've got Dotry Street, this tiny little road.
Yeah. Well, similarly, though, I suppose both have suffered from demolition of such because there's not much. There's Stanley Road, Paul's old house isn't there anymore, is it? I don't think. It's one of those things. I think it could have been another name, another day. Do you know what I mean? It ended up being quite good. So, it's quite a bit to whatever inspired that day.
So 2014, you mentioned about supporting Weller around Europe. And I actually saw you guys, was this last year at Paradiso? And Paradiso is part of that tour. So you were touring like the proper decent venues across Europe, obviously with Weller.
Yeah. Being a music fan, anything that's like historically kind of important, the Paradiso, everyone's been through the Paradiso. I've got a great picture of Pink Floyd, like literally around the corner from it with Syd Barrett, because they were the first, I think they were one of the first, if not the first to play the Paradiso when it opened as a venue from being a church. If you go on YouTube, there's a whole Nirvana gig, I think, from the Paradiso and stuff like that. So it's quite a prestigious venue, really. Yeah, it was amazing. The tour was mega. Paul was really nice. There was, I don't think everything we played he was that bothered about some of our other stuff. And to be honest, I think looking back at it now, I wouldn't be either. I liked some of our stuff, but, I'm just glad that he gave us the opportunity. And he's always been championing young bands, and he's, like Barbara off this latest tour, it's great. He kind of has a thing where he picks things as well that I wouldn't expect him to really go for, which is great. I think everyone's music taste should be eclectic, but also unpredictable as well, They're the most fun people to speak to about music because you never know what they're going to come up with. Paul's definitely like that anyway.
And presumably you were, so before this happened, presumably you were a Weller fan, because one of the things I noticed about the band was you were another one of these bands that gets labelled with mod band, right?
Yeah, well, we ended up changing our name then to Cupids because we were trying to shake off. I grew my hair long because we kept getting this thing that we used to call the mod nod. Like if someone walked past us, they'd do the whole, nodding their heads, like Land Rover. My dad used to have an old Land Rover, and we used to drive past all the Land Rover drivers, and they'd wave at each other on,
Yeah, like the Volkswagen Campers, they do that, yeah.
Yeah, so we were like, oh no, we're starting to get the mod nod now. People are really tiring us with that mod thing, and it's not a big deal. And I'm saying it like as if it's a negative, but we didn't want to go too far down just because we were so into our other music. I think in this day and age to get on as well, to try and break, I don't think you can be too pastiche, Yeah, we ended up changing our name. We made some decisions that I don't think were better, really, but I loved my time doing it, and it run its course. But it was great fun, and playing with Paul was brilliant. I remember the last time we did our last gig with him, supporting him, and he came in to our dressing room with a bottle of Jack Daniels and thanked us. And I was like, well, what are you thanking us for? It was crazy. But, that's just the measure of the person, really. Really nice to people that are trying, even if they're not his cup of tea either. I think he really respects anyone in this day and age that is committed to doing stuff that they, basically they're not going to get paid for until they break, or until they get, even when they break, you have to get to a certain level before it starts to pay for itself. It's a big commitment, really.
Well, it's such a different industry to the one that he started out in 77 with the Jam as well, isn't it? Like, trying to break through now is like nigh on impossible, really.
I talked to Paul once about it, and I think he said if the Jam were in, if it was in this day and age, or the let's say the climate, the music climate was like it is now, back then, he said, I think I'd have given up by now, so I really appreciate and respect anyone that does it, It's a strange place to be in. I feel like Les McQueen from League of Gentlemen, the shit business, you learn. Have a Les McQueen car key ring just to make sure. I always look at it when I'm driving my car just to make sure that I know that, never to be too cynical about the music business.
I love that. One of the things about you is, and I've seen clips on YouTube of you as a solo artist and gigging and stuff. I mean, your talents as a guitarist are incredible, and vocally as well, superb. And I'm guessing there's so many mixtures of this kind of love of music in your repertoire and stuff. But Weller was a thing when you were starting out in terms of like covering his songs and things like that, I guess.
I do remember Britpop. I'm just old enough to remember it, and I liked Oasis. I never went mental over it just because I thought there was so much other stuff. Supergrass were my 90s band, and I loved OCS. But Weller as a solo artist was my favourite. So I've always liked his stuff because I've always been into that kind of soul thing, and I like how he does. He's obviously, like, there's no denying that you can really hear those kind of bands, Traffic, obviously the Small Faces and things like that and everything. And I just love good vocals, and Paul, for me, like, especially from like his solo period, I think he's got better and better vocally, really.
The other band members have mentioned this WhatsApp that you have for the tour and kind of chucking in suggestions of songs and stuff. Are you yet at that position where you can add in the suggestions?
Yeah, whether it was welcome straight away, but I just felt like, well, I'll just get like tucked in straight away, and I just thought, yeah, well, I like this, so let's have a go on it. But then people say, oh, well, we did that last tour, and like, all right, well, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like,
what were the ones you would suggest now? So if you were on the WhatsApp this afternoon, what would you suggest? What are the ones you wish you could play now?
Well, I really want to do Long Got Summer.
Oh, yeah. As a bass player, that's a great song to play as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even for that. I just think it's a great pop tune. I mean, we don't have to get the baby oil out and our T-shirts off or anything. But I just think it's a great song. And I think it's kind of overlooked because some of his Style Council stuff is, I think, like A Very Deep Sea. I have no idea how that wasn't a bigger song. I think it's in my top 3 that he's ever written. I think it's amazing. And what else? I don't know. Something like... I like Susie's Room, or there's tons of stuff. There's tons to pick from. It was Tom that kept suggesting Rip the Pages Up. And when that finally happened, it was like, wow, I have no idea how it was a B-side anyway to start with, really.
No, great. And a great opener for a gig.
And one that really, like, a lot of people wouldn't know. They'll like it. It's like how he's been saying on this tour recently, you won't know all the songs, but, they're really fucking good songs and we're going to do them anyway because you're going to love them, It's also the element of surprise, which I love about going to a Weller gig as well, because you want that from an artist, right? I don't just want you kind of somebody trotting out the big singles, if you like, Well, yeah, you never really know. He's going to always have his staple tunes that he likes or whatever, but there's always going to be some surprises on every set, even for us, and I think it's great. We do suggest, and then he goes away and has a think, and then, within a week or something of us doing the rehearsals, he'll say, right, these are the 4 I want to look at, or maybe 6 or something. Sometimes it gets carried away and it's more than 6 or 8 or whatever, but then it always gets whittled back, or Paul just says on the day, like, I'm not feeling that one. But there's always something new to add to every tour, and that's what's really good, And for me, it's great because some of the lads I've done before, but I've not for a lot of these things. So, I think one thing I did suggest, I remember, was when we did Ireland, which was like 2022, I think. Like it was like November 22 or October. I really wanted to do the album version of Out of the Sinking, and we did do it, which I thought, am I pushing it too far here, asking for something like that. But we did do it, and we've not done it since, but we did it, and it sounded really good. Actually, we tried it in the rehearsals for sound check for one of the gigs that we've just done, and Steve started playing it on guitar, and we just all played along, and it sounded great. So that might come back, I don't know.
Fingers crossed. All right. Well, fingers crossed. Well, look, let's talk about your entry into the Weller Band. And actually, to get there, we have to talk about the specials as well, because you mentioned playing with the specials. And it's funny because only very recently, I don't know why, but the specials passed me by a little bit, which sounds utterly ridiculous. But I've been getting into them for obvious reasons with Terry's passing. I saw the Six Music session and I missed Protest Songs as an album. I don't know how I missed that. Again, utterly ridiculous. And I watched this Six Music session and then there you were popping up and I was like, oh my God, brilliant.
Yeah, again, like Steve, it was kind of one of them. Just waiting for the call. If there's anything that I needed to cover, I did the full tour of that one. We did like an acoustic tour. One of the things was this Radio 6 music session, so I was on that again. They're all great people. Terry was really, really lovely bloke, you know. So I, again, feel so blessed that I got the opportunity, even though it was kind of through a stand-in thing. But I just really appreciate that Steve gave me the opportunity to actually cover for him, because it's big shoes to fill, and if I cock up, it kind of looks he's the person that's trusted in me to do it. So. Again, I owe a lot to Craddock because he given me a lot of chances to. Probably why I'm here, really. It started from Pilgrim and then it was through Craddock, really, as well. So,
but also, they're not going to do that unless you've got talent, Jake. And I know you're not going to say this, so I'll say it for you. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, actually, you might have got one chance, but actually, you proved yourself time and time again in those scenarios, didn't you?
I've been really busy doing other gigs or something, and I didn't quite know something enough. And Steve would give me the look, you know, like, you've not done your homework enough, you know. And then you realise, like, from the, like, you know, you don't do that again, you know. You learn, you know, and it's all about your schooling, you know, and earning your stripes of where you should be. So, which I think Steve's done his own fair share of that as well. He's kind of come up through a similar kind of thing, playing with OCS, and then he ended up getting the job with Paul. And he's such a well-drilled musician, and he's got the ears that are like, he notices things that he mixes and stuff. I suppose it's just from years of doing it, but it's great for me because I feel like now I'm around them a lot more, like from doing it, learning a lot more again, and kind of rekindling a love of things that I'd forgotten I was really like into or whatever.
Because Josh said to me actually, yeah, about Steve, he said like he knows every part of every song, so it's not just his own bits or whatever. Yeah, he'll spot from over if you've missed it or got your bits not quite right. He'll know that because he knows every single element, right?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, really keen ears. Josh did the bass, covered for a couple of tours as well before I joined. If you get Josh on something, then you've done well as well, because he's another one. He's really keen.
Huge talent as well. Right, so let's talk about joining the Paul Weller Band. What was your first gig? Can you remember? And how did you feel?
Weirdly, I was all right. It kind of started because it wasn't as bad because I'd known the lads for like quite a while. You know, I didn't really know Tom, but now I do know Tom, and he's brilliant. He's so much fun. But yeah, I kind of knew everyone. And Paul's got this weird thing where I actually think he's really, really comfortable to be around. I feel really comfortable in his presence. I mean, I obviously wanted to do a really good job when I put all the homework in, but I felt quite comfy on stage doing it. There was nerves, but sometimes that's not a bad thing. But it was Hot Farm in Kent. And I do remember that Paul, when he introduced us, he got to me and he said, on bass guitar, we've got Jake. And he forgot my second name. That's like, so, and I just had to shout over to him, it doesn't matter what my second name is, just get it done with.
And the thing we should say as well is you weren't given much notice for that first gig because of the stuff that was going on with Andy Cross at the time. It was like literally a matter of days, right?
Yeah, between having the call and the gig. But so what happened was I was supposed to be covering for Steve with the specials in Norway and Holland, I think. And because of lockdown, I've moved house as well. I bought a house and obviously moved all my stuff, and I got my studio sorted, and bits of my life are scattered around everywhere, trying to, you know, get them back to where they should be, like when you move house. And because of lockdown, no one had been on holiday or anything, and I couldn't find my passport. So I lost my passport and felt dreadful. I was in London at the time watching Matilda with my girlfriend. So I got all these people, you know, like singing all this, all this whatever it is. And then I'm thinking, God, where's my passport? And my mum's at my house, like frantically turning everything over. I'm like, is it here? Is it there? Whatever. And anyway, it ended up that I couldn't get my passport sorted in time because of the backlog. Couldn't go. Felt really, really bad about it with the specials because I thought I'd let them down. I was almost in tears about it because they're amazing people, and I thought everything's kind of down to me and it's my fault, you know. And anyway, I got cover from a friend of mine who's an amazing guitar player. I got cover, so I knew that was sorted. But then I was sat mopsing about thinking, well, they'll be flying now, you know, and you know they'll be going any time now. And going to Norway. I've always wanted to go to Norway as well because I'm a United fan for my sins. So Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's like a hero of mine. I've always wanted to go to Norway. Couldn't go to Norway. Felt really bad. I'd let everyone down. And then I just got a text from Steve Pilgrim saying, "I heard that you're free, obviously because you're not going away." And I said, "Well, yeah, I am. Yeah, you know." And he said, "Well, you're going to get a call in a minute." So I thought, "Oh, okay." I didn't know what it was about. And then I just got a call from Paul. So it was like, "Well, hi, Jake, can you get down here as soon as possible? We need a bass player like now. We've got a gig in like a couple of days' time, and there's like I think it was like 38 songs or something to learn." So got this little. My friends, it's like I got this little bass that's like a little tiny ukulele bass that I used to always rib him for having. Can I borrow it? Yeah, why? Like you've always taken the mick out of me for having it. And I was like, well, I'll tell you, in a bit. But can I borrow it first? So I was like, yeah, I borrowed it, started just learning my stuff. And I had like, I don't know, that was about 4:00 in the day when I found out about that, 2:00 or something. So I didn't have much time before. He's like, can you get down here in the morning, get the first train like 5:00 or something? Because I live up near Manchester. So I was there from dinner time and we sat playing with Paul and the whole band, like what happened yesterday? I was sat at home kind of twiddling my thumbs, feeling sorry for myself. And then all of a sudden I had a lot of work to do, And there's a great picture of me on our WhatsApp group of, it was really red hot. It was a bit like it is today. It's a really warm day. And sat in Paul's garden at the barn with no clothes on, just some boxers and this little bass in this deck chair with, it was bizarre. It still is really. It's still totally bizarre, Kind of feel like at some point I'm going to just wake up and it won't have really happened.
There's a wonderful thing there though, where you obviously have that confidence in your own ability that, to a certain extent, that I can do this. Is that a mixture of the other people who've got faith in you as well as yourself?
I think like Steve knows, and I think Paul knew anyway, really, and Pilgrim knew. But I'm so in between doing all those, like doing things with Braddock and stuff, I just gigged in pubs and clubs and wherever. My dad's a musician. My uncle's a singer. My granddad was a pub singer. So I've just kind of grown up around just, always being around. I've always wanted to be a musician. Doing like 300 gigs a year for the past like eight or 9 years, and a lot of that involves of, people shouting out, echoing, play this, play that. So you kind of learn very quickly about like how to just learn, really quick and pick things up. And you got to get your ear, your music, you got to get your ear tuned to picking stuff up and you just get better at it. That definitely helped me a lot, years of playing toilets around the country, really.
We'll have to touch on your first solo album as well in a sec too, because I want people to know about your own music as much as the Weller connection as well. It's important. But there obviously comes that time where you get that stamp of approval, you play those gigs, but you then become a permanent part of the live band.
Yeah, well, it was a run of like 8 outdoor shows or something like that over the weekends of the summer. And by the last one, Paul just kind of put me aside and said, I think you're doing really well. I hope you've enjoyed it, and that's a bit like, well, of course. Do you want to carry on doing the next gigs that are coming up? So I was like, well, I'd love to, yeah. Yeah, it was just one of those things. It just ended up spiraling into, it was never a kind of weird Secret Masons thing like initiation ceremony. It's just kind of like, right, you're doing it now, so it was great.
Claire Moon and I had this conversation. Actually, Charles and I had this conversation as well about Paul as a manager. So forget the fact that he's the kind of bandmate and, leader of the band and all that. But technically he's your boss then. So again, I asked Claire the same thing. Are there like performance reviews? Are we kind of setting objectives like you would in the corporate world? What's that situation like?
Paul never stops thinking about music ever. Like I've never known anyone to just like be so on it all the time. He just literally never does anything but think about music. I think that's why he is who he is. At the end of a gig, we'll get a kind of thing where, he doesn't really sit us down or anything. He doesn't sit us down individually a lot of the time. We'll just talk about it when we're on tour and we'll just say, that was good last night. Or, someone will come up with an idea. We kind of it's really good because everyone feels, I think, very much, even though it is Paul's band and he gets the last say on everything, rightly so, obviously. But everyone, I think everyone feels like they can contribute and not everyone's right. It's kind of one of them though, but I don't think anyone's scared about just saying, we need to do this or we need to do that or that needs to tighten up or, and Paul's, very open to us and lets us kind of do that. I think he likes the idea that we do that as well. And I think as well, it's not interfering, it's showing that we care, It's not about like, well, stop having your opinion on things. It's more a case of, I've got an opinion on something that we did last night because I think it can be better, and I think I think we all make each other better. And that's how I think that's why we are a really good band,
Well, yeah, because you're all invested in that music, that sound. It does feel like a band, right? Even though, yes, it's Paul's name above the door. This feels like, the Jam, the Style Council. It feels like those types of things.
He likes it like that as well. I think he wants it. He likes the idea of being in a gang. I don't think he likes the idea of like how you might get big artists like Elton John that they travel separately and they go into their own dressing room. Paul has his own dressing room, but a lot of the time he just ends up. It's just one of them things that if he wanted to do that, then that's totally, I respect that totally. But it's just the way he operates. I don't know. I think he just likes the camaraderie of it all. We feel like he likes us. It's not to do a good job and now piss off. You've done your gig now. So I think it's nice when we're on tour. We do all hang about on the bus together, and we might go for a swim together or something. When we're at a hotel, or it's nice. It's nice to feel like you're in part of band, and I've missed that personally since my band split up. Not getting the world's smallest violin out, but yeah, it's nice to be a part of that.
Suggs said to me the other day that Paul's interested in everybody, and he said Suggs was like, it's really fucking annoying. He'll talk to every single person. He's interested in everybody's backstory.
The thing about Paul is he actually the first time I met him, I had so many questions I wanted to ask him, and he just kept asking him stuff about me. First time I met him, he just asked me if I wanted a brew. And I don't really drink brews, which is weird, I know. But I said, I'm all right, thanks. And then I thought, well, why did I do that? I could have had a brew from Paul. But I'll give him that. He's a tea fiend.
I've heard this. He absolutely loves the tea. On the tours recently, you've obviously been playing songs on the Sunset, Fat Pop, and then we've started to get a sneak preview of 66. The purpose of these podcast recordings is great hearing your story, Jake, but let's talk 66. So the first Weller album that you're actually playing on as a release, that must be pretty cool, right?
I mean, there's not a lot. There's only like 2 tracks, or maybe 3. I think it might be 3. But there's only one I'm playing bass on, but Paul's a mega bass player. So I'm not really needed on that front. He knows what he wants, and he always plays the right thing. I mean, all them tracks, like you think about Into Tomorrow and stuff like that, I think that's Paul on bass. There's a lot of things that I didn't realise. I thought it was Marco, or it's not. A lot of the bass players play with him live, but a lot of it you realise like, wow, that is actually Paul on bass. So he doesn't need me as far as these recordings are concerned. Definitely not. But it's nice that he asked me on a couple of things. He sent 2 tracks up to me here because I'm sat in my studio, so I've got a studio up. And he sent me 2 tracks and said, "Can you put some bass on?" And I'm looking at just a different angle. Maybe can you try something and send them back? So he sent me Soul Wandering, and he sent me Rise Up Singing. I did Rise Up Singing, but I did it without the strings. The strings hadn't been recorded at the time. It went back to him, and it was a bit busy, and it was really, but especially with the strings in mind. So he didn't use that. He used the demo of what he put down originally, but he used my bass for the Soul Wandering. So that's I played bass on that. That's nice.
Well, here we are. I've got it here. The Record Store Day Red Vinyl. It's an actual single as well. So you don't get many of those these days, do you?
I don't either because I've not got a copy of it yet.
You had to get up at like 2 a.m. to queue, Jake. Come on.
Oh yeah. I think there might be one down at the barn maybe for me. But yeah, it was cool. It was wicked. I just sent it back down to him, and he was just like, "Yeah, that's right. It's done." But as far as the bass concerned, he knows what he wants, which I'm more than happy to just accept that. That's cool because I play bass on my own stuff, and before I was in this band, I wouldn't have considered myself a bass player, even though my dad's a bass player. But I'm a guitar player really. Hopefully, maybe in future when I'm a little bit better at it, he might use me for a few more songs.
Let's talk Sleepy Hollow. So would you consider yourself a singer? Would you class yourself as that then? You must do.
I think I'm more a singer than I am anything else, really. I've always said if someone said, right, you've got 2 choices, I chop off your hands or I rip out your vocal cords, I always said just have my hands, because I just think singing's the best thing ever. All my favourite things, I don't listen to guitar music. I used to when I was learning as a kid, but I'm not interested in that now. I just like soul music or anything with good vocals, good songs, good melodies, good lyrics. It's all about singing for me, first and foremost.
So how does it come about with Sleepy Hollow then that Paul says actually what he needs on this is backing vocals, he needs BVs, and he needs Tom, Steve Pilgrim you mentioned earlier, and you?
Well, at the time, I'd just started to sing more in the band because I had so much to learn. Like the first few gigs I did, I had a mic set up and I put the odd things I was used to playing bass do more or whatever, but I didn't put that much in, and it was just down to Tom and Bilgs doing the vocals. But then by the time a few tours have gone or a few months, we'd started to get a really nice vocal blend. So the three of us backing Paul, So he said, like, if you just set it running kind of thing. We were down at the barn one day. It might have even been rehearsed. So we just try and put vocals down. So we all did the whole Live Aid Christmas single thing. We just stand around and one mic and hold your one headphone and pretend you're Simon Le Bon or something. And then it came really well, actually. But we do sing quite well together, I think, the three of us. Yeah, we did. I'm sure we did another one as well, but I can't remember which one it was.
Maybe there's one of the deluxe, which I've not got the credits for those, I'll be honest.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I definitely did Sleepy Hollow, though. Yeah, the backing vocals on that. And then the Still Wandering thing. So, like, as far as, that could have been a really short interview, couldn't it, really?
If it had just talked about that, yeah.
I was saying, like, I wasn't sure whether you actually wanted to interview me, really, because it's just like that is it, really. But all I will say is, like, I've seen this album come on for a few months now, like, from being just the notes on the wall of the tracks that he's kind of working on to being like, right, I've heard that now and I've heard a demo, and I'm not being biased either. I'm not trying to say it because he's now my new boss as such, but I think it's actually the best thing he's done for maybe, I don't know, over 15 years even, maybe. And I'm not saying the stuff he's done since hasn't been, but I just think it's the best stuff that it's really, really strong, I thought True Meanings was as well, but every time he comes up with a new album, I think that's probably the best thing he's done since maybe, like, when people say, like, the golden period or whatever, we'll talk about, like, Stevie Wonder doing, like, Inner Visions or something. People say, like, Paul's is like Wildwood, Stanley Road, Heavy Soul, that 90s thing. And I think it's up there with his better. Which is remarkable, isn't it? Because you don't, I can't think of many artists like that where you think he's, what is this now, 45 years, no, more than that now, where the quality is like you're doing your best work. It's like, what? That doesn't happen. I know, it's mad, isn't it? But I think it's just a case of him just being so driven. And I think there's something that he said about time, like on the Mojo thing. And you're saying, like, he's really appreciating the fact that he's still doing it, but there is an inevitable, like, clock ticking where you get older, I suppose, and you want to cram in as much things as you want to do. I think he just wants to. I don't even think he's bothered particularly about leaving a body of work for others. I just think it might be, but like I just think at the end of the day, it's just something he really, really wants and needs to do. I'd love to feel like that at his age, Do you feel, so when you're watching this album in progress, are there elements of that you could then take, you're learning all the time, obviously we all are, but that you can take back into your own work? Because the first solo album, Jake Fletcher, we should say, out in 2019, but you're presumably working on your own thing as well. Out just before lockdown came out as well, what a great time. Oh, yeah. To be honest, that was just there were songs left over from when my band split up, so I just felt like that was something I wanted to get out of the way with so I could move on to doing something else. But then life takes over and lockdown happened, and then I had to get back gigging. But like since I've been doing with Paul, like I've been writing up here in the studio because I've had this thing. It's been brilliant. But the stuff I've learned, it's not even just the stuff I've learned about recording, just being inspired, listening to, like when you're on the bus, someone plays a song, and I'm constantly on Shazam, like Shazamming songs all the time. From what Craddock's play, like Craddock's usually the boombox guy, and he puts on some amazing songs. But everyone has a turn, and Paul puts on quite a lot of music. And Paul sends me stuff on WhatsApp sometimes late at night. The 2 a.m. text, okay, yeah. All about that, I presume, yeah. That's the funny one, yeah. The stuff you that he's not recommending, but just says, have a listen to this, whatever. It's usually brilliant, and I send him stuff too. But that's probably the most inspiring thing is finding all this new music. It's always of a really good quality, and it's the stuff that I kind of want to be finding as well, because I'm really into soul stuff at the moment. So that's kind of where I see my stuff heading, particularly just because it's really fun to sing. Yeah, well, that's going to sound great. With your vocals as well, it's going to sound amazing. You'll have to be the judge of it when you hear it. One other thing I thought with that first solo album was it had quite a political edge to it. And Paul, with his background, with how he feels Red Wedge, there's the flag on the stage in the minute and stuff. My gut is that you're one of the ones who engages in that type of conversation on the tour bus, the political anger of things. Would that be fair? I've kind of got a bit disillusioned since lockdown with all that, because I find that I could never pick a side now. Cause it's weird, because I just think politics is just the shambles, really. I think they all, quite frankly, piss in the same pot, and they all feather their own nest. There's maybe one or two that I think are actually doing it for the right reasons. Kind of come away from it from a kind of I'm on this side or I'm on that side point of view. I'm more on a kind of just I'm a human being, and I think people are more a kind of maybe spiritual to an extent, or just saying, I think this is wrong or whatever, a bit like Paul with the flag that was mentioned, that was been put on his amp of recent, the Palestinian flag. And I think people need to remember that he's not doing it from a political point of view. He's doing it more from a humanitarian point of view. He's not saying he's against a section of people or for a section of people. And I think if you can't look past that, I think there's something wrong with you. And it's more a case of he's trying to sympathise with people's suffering. It doesn't matter to him what flag it is. It just that happens to be a symbol at the moment for just showing solidarity with a section of people that are at the moment suffering. If universal flag, we were saying this, if there was a universal flag that represented that, he'd probably put that up, instead, just like a peace sign. But in a way, I suppose you could put that up. But I think it's important, though, that you do say like that this is wrong. I think there's some people that don't like that. I mean, Eric Clapton's just had one with a picture with he's got a Palestinian strap, like a flag strap. And loads of people are really annoyed about it. Not that I know him, but, if I know where he's coming from as a musician, I'm sure he's coming from it as a point of just, he was an hippie in the 60s, and Paul's, we're really, musicians are mostly hippies at heart, really, they might clean and they might actually have a bath. But really, we're all, I feel like I'm quite hippified. We're all spiritual and we just don't like seeing people, especially when it's because it's something that they've done absolutely nothing wrong to suffer for, So, I mean, we do talk a bit, but we don't really talk about like it as such as like how it used to be, Tory bashing or whatever now. I mean, we know they're idiots, but there's also a lot wrong with the opposing party as well. Really, we do need in my opinion, we need a new party that represents working class people. But that's maybe a bit idealistic, not realistic. But there's no reason why it can't happen.
You mentioned spiritual places. Let me take you to Abbey Road. So before we wrap up, this was the Jolly Boy outing, but that must have been a real buzz. Was that for your first time at Abbey Road?
Yeah, again, another thing that I've never done before. I've always wanted to go to Abbey Road because I'm a massive Beatles fan. Paul's like the biggest Beatles fan ever, but like, I love the Beatles. They are my favourite. But if I had to pick, I don't listen to them every day, but they are definitely they're the best bands that ever was. There ever has been and ever will be, in my opinion. And Paul will agree. And Paul, that is definitely the way I think it is. I don't know how you can argue out of that,
I'm not even going to try.
They don't have to be your favourite band, but I think everyone has to respect that they are the best band that ever was. They just are, because you can't argue it, the amount of output that they've done and everything. But like, just go to where they made all those records and play some of those instruments that they playing the piano that was on Lady Madonna and the Fool on the Hill piano, or just being in the same spot. Weirdly, getting back to like being nervous about gigs or whatever, I've not been that nervous about gigs as such. Sometimes I've had butterflies a bit, but I was nervous about stepping into Abbey Road, which is really weird, isn't it? Like a building made me nervous. I had so much anticipation for it, and it lived up to every bit of it as well. That just stepping into Studio 2, just feeling the reverb of the room back to you, when you're just talking in there. It's amazing. Definitely one of the highlights of my life, really, just going there, as well as playing with Paul so far. It's up there.
Well, two other highlights quickly before we go. Royal Festival Hall, that you mentioned earlier, actually. So this was Sir Peter Blake's 90th. And I think you were like the backing band for all of them, weren't you? Didn't you play with Chrissie Hynde as well? Maybe Suggs and stuff?
Yeah, I think her band are a band within themselves. They were a really good little garage band, I think. They were on tour when Chrissie was asked to do this gig, so we got asked, I think she just messaged Paul saying, can I steal some of your band to play with us for a few tracks? So it was me and Ben and Tom, and then there was Jeff Wooten on guitar, who plays with Gorillaz. He played guitar, and I played bass. Chrissie's cool. She's a really, really nice person.
There was this lovely photo of you with everybody involved in that gig, and you said, if I could put all my heroes in one place, it wouldn't be too far from this lineup.
Yeah, it was mega, really. I mean, even Noel came, and I've never met Noel before until that night, and he was great, he was really nice. But Noel came on and he did like 4 Oasis hits, I think. which I wasn't expecting to do. You know, I was expecting him to kind of stand his ground and just do maybe his latest stuff or whatever. But just to see everyone just do what they were like, kind of, it was almost like it was tailor made to the lineup, but also the steps that everyone made. Although Chrissy Hine, there was some resistance from us when she wanted to play the Minder theme tune.
That's right, I saw that, yeah. The Dennis Waterman song.
I have no idea, but she just really loved the idea of doing it. So it was cool, whatever. But I was thinking, you know, you've got so many great songs yourself. Why do you want to do the Minder theme tune? But you know, she was like, she to be fair, she knows her audience enough. She was like, no, it's going to go down really well. And we were thinking, really, is it though? But everyone started kind of like taking the, you know, it was quite jovial, and the audience really warmed to it actually, and thought it was dead funny. But she, you know, we kind of did quite an all right job of it, really, I suppose. She made
so bizarre, yeah.
It sounded like a Pretenders tune, to be honest. So that's
yeah. Well, I don't, and it hasn't surfaced. There's no bootleg or anything of that.
Why that song? And she, I just love Dennis. I love Dennis. And I was like, all right, did you know him then? And she went, oh, I've never met him. She just really likes Dennis Waterman and she liked Minder. So I was like, well,
fair enough. One final one we should talk about. Let's talk about Blur at Wembley as well. Talk about great bands. I love a bit of Blur. That, again, Wembley Stadium. Paul hadn't played Wembley Stadium since Live Aid.
No, and he wasn't bothered about doing it either. But yeah, you know, he was like, he thought it'd be a good gig, but I think Paul like prefers the more intimate. You know, as you'll see from what his touring list is, he doesn't really play massive gigs. They're usually big theatres, tops, Apollo-sized type venues, biggest, because he just thinks that arenas are soulless, and he's right, they are. I respect the fact that he doesn't just go for the jugular, does one night in one city, takes the money and runs. You know, like a lot of artists do. He's in it for actually creating art and doing it for all the right reasons, which is never money.
No, and I think, I can't remember if it was Bill or Claire was saying about like a lot of these tours barely even cover themselves financially. So you needed like a Wembley thing like that to cover the expenses for the rest of the year or whatever, you know. I
was buzzing about it anyway, just because I'm obviously about doing the gig, but seeing Blur, my girlfriend's a massive Blur fan as well. So she came with her friend and it was a really good day. And Blur were amazing as well. And we sounded all right as well from the videos I've watched back. You know, it sounded pretty good. Nick Warren is one of the best engineers I've ever heard in my life. So he's an engineer from Stockport. Yeah, he does like to go on about him being from the north, but for some reason. But he's an amazing engineer. And he used to do like 20 years for Prodigy or something he's done, or maybe from the start of Prodigy getting big. So, you know, he's a really good engineer. So it sounded good, I think, and we played well. It seemed to go down really well. And put that on your tick list as well, you know.
So what's still on the list? What's left? You've done them all this last 18 months, 2 years, right?
I don't know now, because Albert Hall's been done. So, like, yeah, kind of, I'm happy now.
You got the US tour coming up in September, right?
I mean, Madison Square Garden's in it, but I don't, you know, it's one of them, when will that happen? I don't know. But, or Hollywood Bowl or something like that, maybe on the moon or something, I don't know. But I'm just really thankful I'm here, you know, that to be honest. It's come by a few weird default things happening, but you know, you just got to be grateful of it, haven't you? Yeah.
Well, look, it's a blast seeing your journey and hearing your journey and watching you join the band and where it's going, and all the music's fabulous as well. You know, I love it live, so it's such a great experience, man.
Thanks for having me, you know, on it. I suppose there's going to be some people that are absolute well nuts that will listen, so I'm hoping so.
Well, and also your own material, which we'll continue to dig into as well. I have one final question for you, Jake, before you go, right? You're allowed one Paul Weller song for the rest of your life. It can be The Jam, The Style Council, or solo. What are you going to go with?
It's solo. And it's got to be Out of the Sinking for me. Album version. It's just mega. Or is it Wings of Speed? I don't know. No, Out of the Sinking. I just think it's just mega from start to finish. But there's so many. Again, I only know that because I thought you were going to ask that question, so I had to think. Otherwise, I'd have been here for quite a while trying to think that.
But I'll tell you what, I don't know. I mean, this is going to sound utterly ridiculous. I don't know if I know the difference between the album version and the single version. I'm now going to go and have to compare. It's been so long since I listened to the single version. I'm not sure what the difference is.
It's if I said that. He did a live version that was like a more chill back version.
Okay.
Driving, boom, 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 boom. I just love that. It's just mega. And when the guitars come in and stuff, there's not one bit about that song I could change. It's just mega. But there's not one bit about the full album or really anything Paul's done that I'd change, to be honest. That, if I had to, gun to your head kind of thing, what's your favourite? That definitely.
Nice. He did that. I think I can't remember what the set list is. 2 seconds on. I went up to Liverpool and saw the acoustic gig just before Christmas that Steve Pilgrim had put on. And Out of the Sinking was the final song they did on that, him and Steve Brooks.
Yeah. It sounds great. I mean, a good song sounds good in its most primitive form anyway. It's always going to sound good. That's a good gauge of a song. If it can be stripped back to nothing, one instrument, one vocal, then it's a good song. But I do love that version with Whitey, and, I'm not sure who else is on it. It's just mega. Just such a good version, that how driving it is. And it just reminds me of something. It could be a small bassist track even or something, the way that the vocals are, and my dad's favourite one as well.
Hey, Jake, this has been so lovely. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, man.
Hey, thank you. Nice one, bud.
A reminder, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Paul Weller Fan Podcast, you can find a whole box set packed full of brand new episodes. The Story of 66, available now wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and more, or at paulwellerfanpodcast.com. Whilst you're on my website, why not head into our store, grab yourself a virtual coffee. It's always nice to get a little thanks for this free content. Much appreciated. All available online, paulwellerfanpodcast.com. And here's the big ask. Please do spread the word on social media. So many amazing people giving their time for free to chat to me on these episodes of the podcast. So I'd love it if you could spread the word. Facebook, Instagram, and X. Tell everybody about the Story of 66, this celebration of the brand new album from Paul Weller. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.